Horrorphiles, the Forgotten Lighthouse. My friend Caleb served in the Royal Maritime Patrol of Nova Scotia for nearly 15 years. He's one of the most level-headed, no-nonsense men I've ever met, tough as the Atlantic and twice as blunt. He doesn't believe in ghosts or UFOs, and he definitely doesn't exaggerate. But the story he told me during the summer of 2023 still unsettles me. It happened in late 2016 when Caleb was stationed at an isolated lighthouse called Wraith's Hollow Point, located far off the coast near Black Shoals. The lighthouse sits alone on a jagged outcrop surrounded by brutal currents, unreachable except by a chartered supply boat or helicopter. The structure itself is fully automated, but due to some strange power inconsistencies the year before, the agency decided to send 2 technicians instead of 1 Caleb, and a new guy named Marshall Quinn. The first few days were uneventful. Gloomy skies, constant wind, a schedule filled with maintenance, checking the rotation assembly, scrubbing salt from the gears, testing the diesel backup generator. Boring stuff. At night, they'd cook canned meals, drink cheap tea, and play cards in the flickering light of battery-powered lanterns. He wasn't sick, but there was a pressure, like being underwater or just before lightning splits the sky, clinging to the same part of the mechanism. They were officially disturbed now. Someone or something was interfering. They locked every hatch, reinforced the stairwell with crates. Still, each night, something new found its way in. A shawl, a glove, a doll's bonnet. When Caleb asked who he was talking to, Marshall blinked in confusion. "No one," he said. The room felt colder than usual, and there was a kind of humming in the silence. That's when he realized the lighthouse beacon wasn't sweeping the ocean. On the 4th night, though, everything changed. The 70-pound bulb had been unscrewed, placed upright in the middle of the floor like a shrine. The protective lens had been etched with circular marks they couldn't recognize. Marshall whispered that he saw a face in the mirror glass. A woman's face, reflected where no reflection should have been. Caleb awoke around 10 a.m. with a feeling that something in the air had shifted, which was impossible. Then came the sound footsteps on the stairs above them, deliberate, measured, coming down, but there was no one there. They were both stir-crazy, bored, and looking for something to break the monotony. Lilith seemed confident. She had a wild streak. Said she'd walked the cliffs dozens of times and knew how to avoid rangers or patrols. There, they found the rotation gears moving, but the beam itself was jammed. Something had blocked the lens. Wind howling, foam crashing against the rocks below. Even in maintenance mode, the beacon was supposed to rotate slowly every 6.5 seconds. It was their job to ensure it did. It reeked of rot and deep-sea brine. The door had been locked from the inside, windows sealed. There was no way that thing should have been there. They cut it loose and tossed it into the sea below, chalking it up to some freak occurrence. His voice didn't match the scene. It was too casual, too cold, and he followed them, step for step, silent except for that one unsettling line, "She's with us now." He shook Marshall awake, and they both climbed the steep, winding staircase to the lens chamber. He'll just stare past you, like he's listening to something far away. It was a wet, barnacle-covered shroud, looked like a funeral veil, soaked and slimy, tangled in the mechanical armature. He worked alone, a hardened man with 30 years in marine salvage. No stranger to isolation. He found an old maintenance closet jammed shut on day 1. On day 2, it was slightly ajar. Inside sat a wooden box, soaked and mossy. He didn't open it, just shut the door. But the next night, the exact same thing happened. No return trail, no boat, just steps that ended at the cliff. This time, it was a child's cape, red, tattered, laced with fine seaweed and tiny shells. Drenched, another circled behind. As he reversed, one of them slammed a hand against the back window. No words, just eyes. When the crew finally picked him up days later, he looked hollow, sunken, each more rotted than the last. On the 7th night, Caleb heard whispering from Marshall's cat, not sleep-talking. A conversation, quiet, directed toward the far corner of the room. Later, Caleb caught him staring out the upper window into the dark surf, muttering, "She's out there, she's waiting." The man was unraveling. By the 9th night, Marshall was barely speaking. He stopped eating, spent hours just standing by the lens room door. The 10th night, the beacon chamber door was wide open, and Caleb. He felt something touch his shoulder, but nothing was there. It's cold, salty air and silence. The 11th night, the emergency sat phone rang at exactly 2:12 a.m. Caleb hadn't touched it. When the boat came for pickup the next day, the deckhand asked about the distress call, a call that included static and a broken voice whispering. Marshall never returned to duty. He left the service and moved inland, away from the ocean. Caleb still works with the Maritime Patrol. But if you ask him about Wraith's Hollow, he won't answer. Bonus scene: the Montclair encounter. During the same COVID lockdown year, another friend of mine, Jordan Wells, an artist stuck at home, had a Tinder match with a girl named Lilith. Someone local from Suffolk Hill. One foggy night, they drove east to a spot Jordan had never been before. The Montclair Lighthouse Trail, closed to the public due to erosion. They parked and slipped through the barricade fence. What struck Jordan first was how surreal the lighthouse looked at night in real, like a digital rendering hanging in fog. They walked the cliff trail with flashlights. And then she said his name. He turned. Lilith's light had locked onto someone standing behind them, a man in a parka. Hood up, motionless, watching. They called out. No response. Then the man asked, "Y'all want something stronger than beer?" It wasn't a ranger. It was something else. When they reached the path's end and doubled back to the parking lot, they realized 2 more figures had joined behind them. Quiet, coordinated, no yelling, no rushing, just presence. As they approached the car, the figures closed in. One tried the passenger door. They peeled out. The figures didn't chase. They simply stood there, watching the taillights vanish into the dark. Final account, the box in the stone. A few years earlier, an older contractor named Lewis Harrow was sent to survey a decommissioned lighthouse on Obsidian Key, a stone island forgotten by time. The lighthouse was in poor shape. Rust, cracked brick, mold. That night, he heard footsteps above him, slow and ascending. Not rats, not wind. The next day, the box had moved outside the closet now, still sealed, still pulsing with dampness. He also found bare footprints circling the outside of the tower. Later, at night, he heard knocking 3 times from inside the tower wall. He submitted his report. Unsafe, do not enter. Structure compromised, but he never mentioned the box. When I asked why, he looked me in the eye and simply said, "Some places aren't haunted, they're hungry."